stuff. We'll get to that in a moment. On your right, you have a player who played the Magic Online Players Championship at PAX East, and that is Andrew Shrout, and he is playing Dredge. A deck that we talked about at the very top of this tournament might be a pretty good choice. A lot of people not playing Graveyard Hate. It's certainly a calculated risk.
Yep.
And you see Shrout playing that deck this weekend, and he's having some success as he hits X and 2 this weekend. And I mean, this is your pretty standard Dredge deck, honestly. He does have Faithless Looting plus Lion's Eye Diamond, but this is a deck that's trying to kill Gerry super quickly, not interact with him.
So is Grizzlebrand a normal inclusion in sorts of lists? I haven't seen a Dredge deck in a while, so I'm a little behind the times on modern Dredge technology.
I have seen some with Grizzlebrand. You do see some with Sun Titan. You know, you do see some that just have like just one random giant guy to get back.
Sure.
You know, it varies. I mean, maybe you'll see a Blazing Archon on occasion. Who knows?
Interesting. Okay. So it has some kind of reanimator plan B element to it.
Yes.
Because I know Sun Titan actually came out of vintage Dredge.
Yep.
I was very familiar with there. I'd not seen that really make the transfer to Legacy much.
Sure.
But I think Grizzlebrand's an interesting inclusion there.
Yeah, Grizzlebrand's kind of neat. I mean, it lets you go off, for lack of a better term. You know, you've seen Dredge decks in the years past play Sphinx's Lost Truths. Just a way that when something comes into play, you draw more cards, dredge more, and then just go absolutely crazy and kill them all in one turn. Grizzlebrand does allow that. It also lets you play, I guess, it's hard to say a fair game, but we'll say it lets you play a more fair game by just reanimating that and saying, can you beat a Grizzlebrand? And some decks certainly cannot do that. One thing that Shrout does have this advantage of, outside of having just a very good deck, and probably this matchup in Game 1 where Jay doesn't have Graveyard Hate, is that he can mulligan to 5 like he is right now and still be able to win.
Yeah, Dredge's mulligans, arguably better than any deck, probably in the history of Magic almost.
Yeah,
it needs like 3 cards to be able to to do its business.
Yeah.
And here we see, okay.
So we're going to see a Cabal Therapy from Shrout. He's going to target Gerry, naming Deathrite Shaman. Is that the only way that Gerry can interact with Shrout's graveyard? You see the cards in Gerry's hand. You see 2 Brainstorms. You see an Ancestral Visions, a Baleful Strix, a Abrupt Decay, and an Underground Sea. So Gerry keeps a 1-lander. Brainstorm can probably undo that, though.
Yeah, and he did also have the Deathrite Shaman, so he had some additional mana potential there, although obviously losing that's going to hurt him here.
The one thing that you also see, Tom, is Gerry does draw a Wasteland for the turn. That's a pretty good draw. Is that Shrout did not target himself with that Cabal Therapy, something that you do see Dredge players do, as Wasteland is going to kill that Gemstone Miner. We'll see if Shrout has another land.
So what do you think Gerry is thinking? So you're much more familiar with, both these players know Dredge.
Yes.
You know Dredge.
Yes.
I'm a little out of my element here, so I think, what do you think Gerry's inferring about Shrout's hand when the therapy doesn't target himself? He doesn't have a Dredger, maybe?
Yeah, maybe he doesn't have a Dredger because he did take a mulligan to 5, and maybe he's just hoping to find a Dredger. It's kind of interesting because I'm not actually very sure. Wasteland in that land does make sense to me, but yeah, when he's therapying you and not himself, maybe he's just that terrified of Deathrite Shaman.
Sure.
And it's certainly, I think, within Gerry's range to keep a Deathrite Shaman hand. I think a lot of the players at this juncture of the tournament know what the others are playing, and so Gerry keeps a Deathrite Shaman hand. Maybe Shrout doesn't have a therapy and just goes for it that way.
Here we see, hitting those 2 Grave Trolls on that Careful Study is pretty clutch.
And now you see dredging here of 3 Cabal Therapies, a Dread Return, a Faithless Looting, and a Putrid Imp. Grave Troll goes back to Shrout's hand. He's going to play Undiscovered Paradise, a card that we'll bring up for you guys, one that favors very favorably with Bloodghast. You don't find that in this deck list, but this is a card that lets him add any color of mana. We're going to see a Lion's Eye Diamond. Shrout's going to discard another Grave Troll and a Golgari Thug, and now you're going to see Faithless Looting get flashed back, and Gerry's going to brainstorm a response, probably looking for Force.
Exactly. He needs to Force Will this thing before it gets out of hand here. Unfortunately, obviously not hitting it.
Yeah.
And finding next to nothing. And also, it looks like no shuffle effect.
Not the best brainstorm.
Gerry is going to be locked on these cards he does not want for the next couple turns, which is really unfortunate. Here we see, an Icarid.
Yeah, we see some dredging of we see a Lion's Eye Diamond, a Cephalid Coliseum, a Faithless Looting, a Narcomoeba, an Icarid, and an Undiscovered Paradise. Second 6 cards are going to be a City of Brass, a Stinkweed Imp, another Icarid, a Dread Return, a Stinkweed Imp, and a Putrid Imp. It's almost like Shrout has played on camera before. Look at how he lays those cards out for us.
We see only 1 Narcomoeba hit here, so and we have yet to see a Bridge from Below, which is pretty critical here. So, while he did get very, very lucky in getting those 2 Grave Trolls going off that Careful Study, since then his stretch has been pretty underwhelming. We do have a pair of Icarids here and some black creatures to feed them, so we're on the verge of having a lot going on.
I've seen better dredges though.
Oh, absolutely. The game could be over at this point. He's already dredged 18 cards in 1 turn. There are a lot of dredge draws that just kill you from that point.
But Shrout just have to pass the turn back. As you said, Tom, Gerry was a bit landlocked there with the Brainstorm. You do see a Verdant Catacombs.
He does have a shuffle effect, which I missed. So that's huge here. So you can shuffle at least one of the cards he didn't want and start trying to dig for some kind of action. Now, what that action is going to look like, game 1 here, not a lot of interaction with the graveyard beyond that Deathrite Shaman, which at this point is too late to do anything.
Yeah.
Really. I guess picking off that Dread Return still useful.
Not the worst. I mean, there are 2 in there right now. I mean, that Faithless Looting could certainly be something that he's worried about, but Shrout's not going to take another draw step, so there's not going to be another lines I die.
Yeah, that Faithless Looting now is no longer effective. Shrout is drawing 6 cards a turn from this point on.
Yeah.
Straight into his graveyard.
Just 6, no big deal. So we're going to see Gerry play a Baleful Strix. He's going to draw a card. We'll bring the old Strix up there for you. We call that AJ's Soccer's Invitational card. Just a lot of value. I'm surprised you haven't cast that one in your day.
Yeah, I consider I was very close to playing with it at Denver, but just haven't quite gotten around to it yet.
As we are going to see 2 Ichorids come back. You're going to see a Narcomoeba, a Cephalid Coliseum, a Lion's Eye Diamond, a Putrid Imp, a Flamekin Zealot, and still no Bridge from Belows.
This is unfortunate for Shrout, and also no Griselbrand, because now he'd be able to reanimate that.
And, you know, Dread returning right now is not going to net him any tokens, so, you know, bringing back a Flamekin Zealot doesn't really do anything.
Yep.
He could consider Cabal therapying with those Ichorids because they're going to die anyway. You know, that's certainly something to consider. And, you know, these attacks right now are perfectly reasonable. Get in with those Ichorids. Them dying is not going to remove any bridges or anything like that. So that looks like what Shrout's probably going to do this turn. It looks like he's considering therapying right now as well.
Do you think you send an Narcomoeba here too and trade an Narcomoeba for that Strix just to get in for 7?
Just to get that thing out of the way?
Yeah.
I don't hate it. I think that's perfectly reasonable. You just want to get past that point. It kind of stinks not having any bridges because you want to make sure that your Dread Returns are going to be live. But it looks like Shrout has plenty of black creatures for those Ichorids, so it's certainly a decision that he's going to have to weigh. And you see him taking his time this turn, figuring out if that's something that he wants to do.
He's down to, it looks like 3 black creatures, right? 2 Stinkweed Imps and the Golgari Thug. Oh, and a Putrid. So he has 4 left. Okay, so he still has 2 full turns left. Chose to hold back those Narcomoebas, which I think is certainly reasonable. A reasonable decision there. And now he's going to shred Gerry's hand.
So now you're going to see the flashback on Cabal Therapy. Let's see what Shrout names. He names Abrupt Decay, card he knew about.
Yep.
So he wants to make sure he actually does hit something.
I guess now he's going to name Charlotte's Agent, probably to try to minimize the odds of a Threat Shaman showing up. Although the other Shaman rapidly becoming too slow.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the looks of that Brainstorm and naming that. Of course, Ancestral Visions, no reason to do that. But, you know, Gerry can kind of threaten here. You know, the Brainstorm, put the Visions back, set up a Charlotte's Agent so he can draw 3 cards. The question is, does Gerry have 3 cards that are actually worth drawing into? That's
the real problem that Gerry's going to face in this match, is that he just doesn't have anything in his deck that gets him back to this point. We've gone past the... You know, he can win some games maybe if he can just keep Shrout off of an early Dredge Enabler.
Yep.
Here, unfortunately, he did not have that. And that Careful Study resolved.
So we do see the Brainstorm go bye-bye. You see a hand for Gerry of Bayou, Tropical Island, Charlotte's Agent, and Ancestral Visions. And now Shrout is just going to pass the turn back, again, holding steady with those Narcomoebas. And it's kind of fun to figure out if that's right or not. It feels fine. You know, you don't really fault him for doing it. It doesn't seem like a glaring mistake.
At all.
As we do see Gerry draws an Abrupt Decay for the turn. We might have to get a little bit lucky here with the Charlotte's Agent into something. Just the big question is what's useful. And I really think, as you said, it's only Death Ray Shaman, and again, those just aren't very useful. As we are going to see the Charlotte's Agent, Cascade is going to happen here, into a Tarmogoyf, which is going to be huge. But again, that's not the most useful thing in the world. And Gerry having to try to slog through these Ichorids and his Narcomoebas, I mean, you can't fade Bridge from Below forever.
Right.
He's done a pretty good job of it so far, but as you said, 6 cards are going to keep coming for Shrout every turn.
As soon as Shrout mills the Griselbrand, the game's over. As soon as he mills probably 2 bridges, the game will end.
Yeah.
Here, Gerry getting on the offensive. You got to do something.
Get frisky with that Baleful Strix. I like it.
The nice thing with the Goyf is it means the Ichorids can't attack, so you're not going to die to kind of marginal things from Shrout. He will have to actually kill you.
Yeah.
He'll have to do a little bit of work, but he's pretty close to being able to do that work. It's not going to take much longer.
So now we're going to see Upkeep triggered. Both Ichorids are going to be triggered. You're going to see Putrid Imp get removed. And you see Shrout considering, do I remove this Thug? Do I consider maybe Stinkweed Imp? Looks like he's going to go reaching for the Imp. Both the Ichorids are going to come back in. Undiscovered Paradise still in play as well. Now we're going to see a Dredge 6 again of Golgari Gravetroll. And we find a Cephalid Coliseum, a Bridge from Below, finally. 2nd Bridge from Below. 3rd Bridge from Below. Cephalid Coliseum and an Narcomoeba.
And this is going to spell doom, and Gerry picks him up.
Gerry really picks him up.
Yeah, we don't have to go through the motions. We don't have to get that Flame Consolidate into play. But that's going to be a lot of angry zombie tokens coming across the red zone. So, game 1, I think, Shrout obviously has a huge advantage in all his game 1s, playing Dredge, except maybe against the blue-white counterbalance decks that are playing those Rest in Pieces main.
Sure, with the Enlightened Tutor package.
Yeah. Other than that, though, you expect him to win a lot of game 1. After sideboard, I think his sideboard usually not all that relevant. He has some ways to kind of interact with his opponent's hate. But the real question is, what heat does Gerry have?
Yeah, and the one that comes to mind, and this is something that Gerry's been a big fan of in Legacy, is now Spellbound.
Yep, so he's played 3 of those here in this tournament, so those are going to be a big game. 2 Solar Temptations, not that useful. 2 Thought Seizes. Those probably do come in just to try to get him off of his turn 1 dredgers if he has dead cards. Things like Hymn to Torok, pretty terrible here.
Yeah.
As a player has a lot of cards he wants to board out, so I could see bringing in Thoughtseize. Another Hymn in the board, don't want that. Liliana of the Veil, not really where you want to be either.
Really slow.
Actually, and pretty bad. You don't want a +1 when one of your main dreams is that Shrout dredges his one guy, misses on a second dredger, and then gets dredge locked when they're stuck in his hand.
Sure.
Why would you want to card that and discard those?
Yeah, you don't want to
doing that. Maelstrom Pulse not doing a lot, but will come in because it might if Shrout goes for a lot of zombies off of bridges, gives you a chance to get back in the game.
Yep.
2 Baleful Strix, those seem like fine, not exciting. They swap in if you have dead cards, and then 2 Chills, obviously not the matchup for those guys.
Absolutely. So we do see that in his sideboard. I mean, now Spellbound is of course the one that jumps out, and then you have to get a little bit creative with how you do want to go on things. Before we do take a look at Shrout's sideboard for his dredge deck, going to try to fight Gerry's hate. We do want to thank Ultra Pro that they did help us out with this particular tournament. The Star City Games Open Series here in Atlanta featuring the Invitational is brought to you by Ultra Pro. Ultra Pro, the sleeves we've been using forever, Tom. We've been playing Magic for so long.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
These have been around, and some of my favorite sleeves have been around forever.
Yeah, so we do thank them. They are the standard and safe storage. So we do appreciate you guys over there at Ultra Pro helping us out this weekend. Now, as you said, with Shrout and his sideboard, he wants to be able to beat 8 cards. That's the thing with Dredge. You have this insane game 1 percentage, and then things kind of spiral downhill depending on what your opponents have. Is it Leyline of the Void? Is it, Rest in Peace? Is it Nihil Spellbomb? Is it something like Purify the Grave? Who knows? Shrout just might try to power through that stuff. As you take a look at his sideboard, you see an additional copy of Icarid. You see an Unmasked, 2 copies of Pithing Needle. Does he know that Gerry has Nihil Spellbomb? That's a good question. 1 Elishnorn, 1 Iona Shota of Emeria. You see those one-ofs when Gristlebrand is poor, or maybe Flamekin Zealot's poor, you want to board into those. 4 copies of Nature Claim, 3 Street Wraiths, and 2 copies of Firestorm. Firestorm's a card that lets him start Dredge in a different way. 4 Nature's Claim, it gives him the opportunity to interact with a lot of common hate cards in people's sideboards. The fun thing, or the interesting thing about Dredge is how many of those cards do you board in and what do you board out?
Yeah, you don't want to dilute your combo too much. This is a deck that really needs to maximize its interactive. It kind of builds on itself.
Yeah.
So you can really hurt yourself by over sideboarding in decks like this. So it's important not to do that. One thing that comes into play here probably is the fact that Gerry, very public with his thoughts and his deck choices. So he's published a lot of lists that probably have these Nihil Spellbombs in his sideboard.
Yep.
Shrout, I'm sure, reads Gerry's articles, is aware of what Gerry's thinking. Could know that's what's in store for him, and could then know to bring in those Pithing Needles and not to bring in those Nature's Claims.
Sure.
Which is a big advantage. One question I have for you, Street Wraith. Is that the goal there, is to kind of speed yourself up a little bit, or when does that want to come in?
That feels like that's the goal, to be able to speed yourself up, and then maybe when you're on the play in game 3, you just want to try to bowl them over instead of trying to interact with them with these Nature's Claims and these Pithing Needles and naming the right card and all that nonsense. You just want to try to go, pedal to the metal and just Street Race cycle and just try to do something insane on turn 1 or turn 2.
Yep.
And, that's not a common card that we do see in a sideboard, but I think it certainly facilitates a game plan. Is the game plan good or not? That's a better question.
Here we see Shrout getting a very typical thing for Dredge to do. It needs a very specific set of cards that's opening hand. Like we mentioned before game 1, it's perfectly happy going down to 4 or 5 cards to find that right setup.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, Icarid in the sideboard, I guess that's just there for really control matchups or matchups that
a little bit better against your blue decks. When you're trying to grind them down there, if Shrout finally did hit those Bridge from Belows, he hit them all at once. But, if he had only 1 Bridge from Below there, those zombies start to build on each other.
Yep.
And he can kind of snowball there and play a little bit, for lack of a better term, fair game. And be able to churn out some zombies, Icarid them. This is something that we saw with the first incarnation of Dredge many, many moons ago.
Sure.
Icarid was just grinding people out. But now, with Bridge from Below being available, it just lets him play a different game. Gives him a little bit more options.
I do think here against Gerry's deck, Elishnorn doesn't seem to be where you want to be, is my guess. Iona, though, is interesting.
The first thing that comes to mind with Iona is what color are you going to do? Are you going to be able to lock your opponent out? Looking at Gerry's deck, of course, Bug, 3-color deck. You want to see where the cards do line up. And taking a look at the deck list, you see some blue cards with Visions, with Brainstorm, with Jace the Mind Sculptor. You see a little bit of overlap with Charlotte's Agent being blue and green. Do you want to name black? Maybe try to stop a Deathrite Shaman after you deal with the first one, something like that. You want to find what the overlap is and what the color that's going to break Gerry the most. Green is an interesting name because it shuts off Deathrite Shaman and Tarmogoyf and Charlotte's Agent, so it actually stops Gerry from being able to put a win condition into play.
Right.
do you need to go that route to win, as you're going to see a turn 1 Nile Spellbomber from Gerry, and you see a hand with multiple Forcibles as well.
So I'm guessing, this is interesting, so Gerry playing it on turn 1, letting Shrout know, hey, I have the Spellbomb sitting here. You probably don't want to move in on filling up your graveyard too aggressively because I'll pick you off. Also exposing himself to Nature's Claim.
Yeah.
I think it's strange, or I mean, at least unusual, to play that on turn 1. And then Forcible and a Careful Study also, Gerry's line here I think is atypical.
I mean, what you see here is Gerry is basically taking a firm stance of, I want to interact with you very early. I don't want to let you do anything early. I'm going to play this now Spellbomb. I'm going to Forcible your ability to draw cards and get yourself out of the situation, and then just move forward. We're going to see Shrout tap City of Brass again here. He's going to move down to 18, and he has another Careful Study. So you saw Gerry is willing to fight over these card drawing effects that Shrout will use to try to get out of the situation, but he doesn't have a counterspell for this one.
Right. I mean, this is so. Gerry's played way more against Dredge and with Dredge than I have, so
sure.
I certainly. He understands much better than I probably do. My instinct here, though, would be to sandbag the Nile Spellbomb. It does expose you to it getting maybe unmasked or getting ball therapy.
Sure.
But I don't want to let Andrew know that when you move in on your graveyard, I'm be ready for you. And then you let that first Careful Study resolve.
Maybe you can snag him that way.
And you pick him off on the next turn. So Careful Study on turn 1 isn't so scary because he can't follow it up with another draw effect. Careful Study on turn 2, much scarier. He can play Careful Study into a Faithless Looting, for instance, and start dredging right away.
Sure. Now we're going to see Shrout. He's going to dredge 6 cards here with a Grave Troll, Narcomoeba, Pithing Needle, Lion's Eye Diamond, Putrid Imp, City of Brass, and Bridge from Below. And so maybe this is the reason that you see Gerry play it like this. You see the Narcomoeba trigger, looks like it's going to resolve, because that Nile Spellbomb is basically this level of comfort that it's there. You can't go off with this here. Now, I certainly see an argument for maybe holding it and maybe trying to catch Shrout, but maybe that might be just a little bit too cute.
Certainly don't think you want to hold it for a long time. You don't want it sitting in your hand here on turn 3, and then you get caught with he goes off, and you're like, oops.
Yeah.
Oops, forgot to play this.
Yeah.
That's super awkward. And so it might just be that the sequencing with Gerry's hand was he thought he should play it on turn 1 because on turn 2 he might want to play a different spell.
Sure.
There are things there that might make sense. Here we do see Thoughtseize coming in the deck.
I love him sideboarding that in.
Yeah.
Just as you said, you just want ways to interact very early. I mean, snagging a Careful Study, snagging a Breakthrough, snagging something. Maybe even when you're in the play, snagging a Nature's Claim.
On the play, I think it's huge.
Yeah.
On the draw, it's a little more speculative. You don't get to get that turn 1 Careful Study.
Yep.
Or that turn 1 Putrid Imp Enabler.
Yep.
Still not the worst card in the world, that especially if you can counter the first play.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to look at a card like that on the surface, like a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition of Kozilek, and say, man, that's like pretty backwards, right? You're boarding a discard spell, against a deck that wants to discard cards, but you need to go to some interesting lengths to be able to interact with the Dredge deck.
Well, he actually took the Grave Troll.
So he's going to take the Grave Troll. This certainly signifies that Nile Spellbomb's going to get cracked here. Maybe he's just going to take it with Deathrite Shaman as well.
Or maybe it's just going to let Shrout dredge some more and say, keep digging your own grave here. I have this Nile. What's Shrout's plan?
Yeah, what's the worst you can do?
We already have 2 bridges from the, so he does eat it with the Deathrite Shaman. We have 2 bridges in the graveyard, 1 in Shrout's hand. Yep. Only 1 left in the deck. One thing I considered there actually was been taking the bridge from the hand and then just spellbombing 3 bridges away. But again, you don't have to pull the trigger quite yet. You have time here.
See, this is kind of interesting. The back and forth that you see here. Shrout is going to remove a counter from that Gemstone Mine. He's going to tap that Undiscovered Paradise. He's going to play a Golgari Thug. The interesting thing that you see the back and forth here is you see Shrout having to try to work his way through Graveyard Hate, but on the flip side, you see Gerry, he needs to figure out when he needs to pull the trigger in the Graveyard Hate, because if you do something wrong, things go badly for either player if either player does something incorrect here.
Yep. Gerry does have the upside. I mean, Nile Spellbomb does not cost mana to activate.
Yeah.
So it's hard, unless Shrout has a split second card in his deck that would deal with it, which we know he doesn't. Gerry doesn't have a lot to fear there.
Yep.
Potentially, maybe there's some sort of, he pulls the trigger on it, and then in response, Shrout can cycle a Street Wraith to dredge more. But all the things he does after he dredges are sorcery speed.
Sure.
He doesn't have an instant speed way to get creatures out of play to make zombie tokens.
Yep.
So anytime he tries to make tokens, in response, pull in a spell, trigger and spellbomb. And Bridge from Below, it does have the text on it is pretty irrelevant for the most part, but it does say this has to still be in the graveyard, I believe.
Yes, it does.
For the zombies to come into play. So you, from Gerry's perspective, you sit there and you just kind of hang out. And here you can see, man, an odd card in that when it's in play, it does nothing.
Yeah.
but it does have that black casting class to harken back to such other spells as Necropotence.
Hey, I have cast the Bridge from Below before.
Really?
I have. I had to nature claim it once to gain 4 life. That did actually happen. I couldn't believe it, and my opponent certainly couldn't either. But now you do see Gerry pulls the trigger there on the Nile Spellbound. He's going to clear up the graveyards, and now looks like he's going to turn some things in overdrive. And you maybe see that because he knew Shrout's hand, and now you see there a Golgari Grave Troll, a Bridge from Below, and an Ichorid. So he knew the contents. He figured pulling the trigger on that's okay. You're going to see Deathrite Shaman take care of the troll, and you really see the power of Deathrite Shaman in this matchup. It doesn't come as much of a surprise, of course, because we know how powerful this card is. And you see Shrout just concedes.
Him up. Yeah, at that point, I mean, Gerry kind of had the optimal start there. Maybe could consider playing the Spellbomb on turn 2 instead of turn 1, but I mean, if he thinks the ways that Shrout interacts are via Pithing Needle and not Nature's Claim, having sit and play this, he's always going to name Spellbomb whenever he plays Pithing Needle. So him knowing you have it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, not at all. And you see Shrout looking intently at his sideboard, maybe going back to the drawing board, maybe reaching for those Nature's Claims, maybe reaching for those Street Wraiths. That's a very good question, and it looks like you don't see Gerry. Okay, Gerry is going to take a look. I thought he was just going to start shuffling back up again. See if he does try to change anything here. I think this is going to be interesting. You know, it's very easy for people, Tom, to just leave their sideboard as is, especially in a matchup against Dredge, not even reconsider anything, being on the play of the draw. You saw Gerry take a look. He's taking a look through his deck here and wants to make sure that his configuration is okay.
Well, here's a spot that's interesting to me. So I mentioned not wanting to play the Spellbomb on turn 1 because giving Shrout that information that you have it means he might modify his land of play to not be as aggressive trying to Dredge.
Sure.
But Dredge doesn't have a plan B. He has to put cards in his graveyard to do anything.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter as much giving that knowledge. Whereas, say you're playing against like a bug control deck, putting Rest in Peace in play on turn 2, now they know they have other lines.
Sure.
They can play differently. Andrew can't play any other way.
Sure.
So I think it matters a lot less kind of putting that information out there. And similar we see here, Gerry, a lot of times, you know, when you're playing against someone who's observant, you'll shuffle your whole sideboard in and pull 15 cards back out because you want them to know. Here, it's like, he's not going to take out the spell bombs.
Yep.
Again, he's sideboarding one way. There's not a lot of play to that. There's not a lot of kind of, you know, leveling going on here. It's Shrout knows what he's bringing in exactly. Gerry knows what he's up against exactly. They know the game plans. You don't need to waste the time kind of, you know, pretending to re-sideboard. You're not changing anything.
No. It's funny that you bring up the sideboarding in 15 as well. You know, I've played Dredge a healthy amount 3 years ago. And when I was playing that deck a ton, something that I think everyone should do is sideboard in the 15 cards and sideboard out. You know, people are lazy. I don't do it all the time. It just doesn't happen. You know, it's a lot of work. Maybe you can confuse yourself if you're not used to doing it, what have you. A lot of excuses can be made, but it is good practice to do that. And one thing that you know, if anything, if there's one deck that you want to sideboard the 15 and pull the 15 out against, it's Dredge.
Right.
That's the one deck that you want to do it against. And you don't see it happen very often.
Against or with?
I would say against Dredge. Whenever you're playing against Dredge, I think you want to sideboard, because, you know, if you reach for 4 cards, as a Dredge player, you're just going, if he's reaching for 4 cards, you can figure out what they are.
Oh, sure. The first time you start the sideboarding, do it.
Yes.
I don't think you need to redo it between each game.
That's fine, I agree.
Yeah, but I agree. The first time you do not want to tell them, I have 4 cards for you.
Yes.
Because now they can think, okay, what are the typical 4 of? So you play 4 Leyland points a lot of the time. You probably don't play 4 Tormod scripts.
Yeah.
Oh, let me modify my behavior.
Yes.
You definitely don't want to give away that free information.
Absolutely.
I do think Shrout could potentially want to re-sideboard between games as well, if he's not changing anything, because he might be changing his answer set.
Sure.
Don't let Gerry know Gerry saw 1 Pithing Needle.
Yep.
Didn't see any Nature's Claims. Don't let Gerry infer from that you probably don't have Nature's Claims in, or whatever kind of inference he might be able to make.
Sure.
There's value there in Shrout going ahead and shuffling those back up.
Yeah, just going back to the drawing board. Even if he doesn't change, there's certainly value. And you saw him go back to the drawing board and take a long look. Don't know if he shuffled anything in or out, but there's certainly value to going back and taking that look, or maybe shuffling in and out, and making Gerry at least second-guess himself a little bit.
It's dangerous giving a player, you know, of Gerry's caliber perfect or near perfect or just even, you know, extra information.
Sure.
He will process all of it. He will find a way to exploit it. You don't need to give him any additional edges. It is funny you mentioned, though, that being careful about remembering which cards you want to take back out, because I've definitely made a mistake with that before, where if you have a land in your sideboard, it's easy to forget.
Yep.
To pull that land. You get some awkward spots there.
Now we see Shrout is going to play Cabal Therapy on turn 1 against Gerry. He does name Deathrite Shaman.
Naming Gerry, or targeting Gerry.
Yeah, targeting Gerry. And we see here Nile Spellbound, 2 Brainstorms, a Baleful Strix, a Charlotte's Agent, and 2 lands. Tom, if you're Shrout on turn 1, you know Gerry has Nile Spellbound, so he's just going to play 1 and just pass the turn back. Do you name Deathrite or do you name Spellbound?
I think you name
In
Deathrite.
the dark?
I think you name Deathrite.
Okay.
You figure you know he has 4 Deathrites. He almost certainly doesn't have 4 spell bombs. And I think you probably have better answers to, well, your Pithing Needles answer both. If you do have claims in additional out. And looking at Shroud's hand where he has multiple Faithless Lootings, so he knows he's going to be able to get pretty deep pretty quickly.
Sure. He can work his way through his deck. You see his hand. He has 2 Faithless Lootings, Icarid, Golgari Thug. He's got that Celtic Coliseum at the front and a Gemstone Mine. He just doesn't have. He does not have an answer. Yeah, and he's going to play Golgari Thug and just pass the turn back.
Interesting.
Oh, he's going to flash back. Okay.
Okay. Getting probably the pair of Brainstorms?
Maybe those Brainstorms, yeah. Thug's going to go back on top from its triggered ability. Brainstorms are gone. You see Tarmogoyf, Baleful Strix, a Charlotte's Agent, and a Bayou. So Gerry does not have blue mana right now, but he does have a Tarmogoyf to cast.
One thing is a factor with 2 Faithless Lootings, the ability to kind of dig through your deck quickly. It might make sense to maybe the Deathrite Shaman's less scary because when you do find that Python Needle, you play it and you name Spellbomb. If you play it you play it and you name Deathrite Shaman, it probably gets 1 activation.
Sure.
And the rest of your graveyard stays there.
Sure.
But here when you play it to name Spellbomb, you lose your whole graveyard.
Yeah.
And you've discarded 4 cards of these lootings while you're doing this process of digging so quickly.
You're discarding cards of value.
Right, presumably. But now you maybe don't get to. Maybe now you have to discard it differently.
Sure.
Like he has to hold this Grave Troll now, sandbag it for later, because of that spell bomb.
So now you see him discarding here. He's trying to figure out what way to discard. What card can I hold? You know, you see a bunch of Dredgers and you see Golgari Thug, you see Stinkweed Imp, you see Golgari Grave Troll, you see an Icarid in his hand. Is he supposed to let that Icarid go to that spell bomb eventually? You know, is he supposed to keep 2 Dredgers? That's the question you have to ask yourself if you're playing Dredge.
And I think we're at the scene of the looting here. He has to find a Python Needle, or else this game is just going to go the same way we saw in Game 2.
Yeah. So now we're going to see another Faithless Looting here from Shrout. And as easy as Game 1 was for him, this is the difficulty of playing Dredge.
Sure.
You know, it's great to know what you're going to do Game 1. You're going to have that high win percentage. You know, if I was playing Dredge, I just want to play sideboarding games all day and figure out how to go about beating this hate and see what hate cards people have. Because you can see a little bit of difficulty here and some struggle as you're going to see a Dredge here of Bristlebrand, Lion's Eye Diamond, a Gemstone Mine, a Narcomoeba, and a Bridge from Below. That is interesting. You're going to see another Dredge here. So a Golgari Thug is going to turn up a Pithing Needle, a Street Wraith, a Narcomoeba, and a Cephalid Coliseum.
So both these Narcomoebas trigger once we finish resolving and discarding our 2 cards.
Of course. You have to finish the full resolution of Faithless Looting first, then those Narcomoeba triggers will resolve, and they'll come into play. You're going to see him discard Stinkweed Imp, you're going to see him discard...
yep, and so here he goes and pulls the trigger, which makes sense.
Okay.
Getting a lot of action here. I mean, getting both those Faithless Lootings that would otherwise be flashed back. Maybe Shrout with just 2 cards in hand. Hopefully no way to put more Dredgers into his graveyard.
So maybe Shrout accomplished what he wanted to there, which was getting the Spellbomb off the table and hoping to peel into a careful study or Faithless Looting as Gerry draws a Brainstorm. Very good back-to-back draw steps. As he's going to cast Charlotte's Agent now, you are going to see a Brainstorm.
Shrout was really hoping that Gerry hit a Thoughtseize there.
Yeah. Brainstorm is going to show you a Charlotte's Agent, a Deathrite Shaman, and a Wasteland here. So this is a huge draw step for Shrout. Huge on his turn. Gerry's going to resolve this Brainstorm. He's going to set things up in such a way to be able to abuse that Charlotte's Agent again. You see another Brainstorm in hand. You see a Wasteland, even though he already has played a land. But the next turn is going to be huge for Gerry because he's going to be able to Wasteland something. He's going to be able to play Deathrite Shaman somehow, either via Charlotte's Agent, and he has Brainstorm.
If he even wants to, though. So okay, and he's choosing to. So he's putting back Charlotte's Agent, and then the card he wants to hit, which was the Deathrite.
And so across comes Tarmogoyf, just a 2/3 right now, Artifact and Instant in the graveyard. And let's see what Shrout draws this turn. He draws
LED.
Lion's Eye Diamond.
All right, well, game on. Gonna of course wait now and see what Gerry does. He's gonna find out that Gerry does have this Deathrite Shaman on top. It's gonna hop into play.
This is interesting too here because this might change Gerry's line a lot. He sees LED, which seems like kind of boring or whatever. Like, what's the big deal? But you know, it's pretty scary here. And Gerry does have that Brainstorm. If you're Shrout, you don't make a move right now.
Oh, definitely not.
Nothing's changed. There's no reason to crack that LED or anything. Nothing has changed right now.
He might play the Golgari Thug. That's what he's considering doing. Putting it into play and letting it chump that Tarmogoyf. That will go okay for him, right? Because Gerry's not going to be able to pick off the Grave Troll from his graveyard.
Sure. Well, excuse me. The Deathrite Shaman has Summoning Sickness, so there's nothing to pick off right now, so I don't think you make a move. The problem is for Shrout is that Gerry has that Wasteland to take out the Cephalid Coliseum, because something huge could have happened for Shrout on his turn. And you see he's going to pick it off because he would have been able to go Dredge 6. Lion's Eye Diamond is actually the 7th card, and then he could have activated the Coliseum.
Right.
Now Coliseum goes bye-bye. You're going to see Tarmogoyf, and you're going to see Tarmogoyf and the Agent come across now. And now we'll see how Gerry is going to want to finish up his turn in his second main phase.
So that goes is a 3/4.
Here's Charlotte's Agent. Here comes Deathrite Shaman. And Jerry's going to pass the turn back.
The whole gang is here.
Yeah. So he's going to he's going to have to. This is going to be a really good Dredge 6.
He has basically this turn to really get going.
Careful Study, City of Brass, Bridge from Below, Cabal Therapy, Narcomoeba.
Not exactly what he wanted. And he's down to 1 Dredge in his graveyard that's going to get eaten by that Deathrite Shaman. So, yep.
And he does concede the game as he's fully aware of what's going to happen. So Gerry Thompson does win this match 2-1 with Charlotte's Bug against Andrew Shrout playing Dredge. Gerry is going to move on now to 9-2 in this tournament. Shrout, that's his 3rd loss. So you see the power of Dredge game 1. You see Shrout mulligan to 5 and still win the game very easily. Then you see the power of the sideboard cards, and you have to be very, very experienced with Dredge to beat the sideboard cards.
And a lot of times, I mean, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, you are a large dog in a lot of these sideboard games because the sideboard cards are just so efficient.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how much talent you have or how many times you've played the game. If you don't have another plan to audible into or another way to play games, your hand is forced.
Yeah, you put it very well with